Before we dive into this shocking tale of secrets, double lives, and unexpected love, if you're ready for a story that will leave you speechless, make sure you smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you do not want to miss how this one ends. And drop a comment. Have you ever discovered something shocking about someone you thought you knew? Let's get into it. In a peaceful village called Greenhill, nestled in the lush valleys, there lived a man named David. David was the kind of man every parent wanted their daughter to marry. Hardworking, respectful, honest to a fault. He worked as a school teacher in the village, earning modest pay but respected by everyone. At 30 years old, he had built a small but comfortable house with his own hands, saved every penny he could, and lived a simple, predictable life. David had never been the type to chase after women or party in the city like his friends. While other young men his age would travel to the capital on weekends, spending money on clubs and girls, David would stay home, reading books, tending his small garden, and helping his elderly mother. His friends called him boring. His mother called him responsible. David just called it living right. Then one Sunday morning, everything changed. Grace walked into the village church, and David's world tilted on its axis. She was absolutely stunning, tall and elegant, with smooth dark skin that seemed to glow in the morning light, and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and warmth. She wore a simple but beautiful traditional dress, her hair wrapped modestly in a headscarf, and she carried herself with quiet dignity that made every head turn. After the service, David learned that Grace was from a neighboring town and had come to Greenhill to work as a nurse at the local health clinic. She was staying with her aunt while she settled in. David, who had never been bold with women, found courage he didn't know he had. He approached her after church, introduced himself, and offered to show her around the village. Grace smiled, a smile that made David's heart skip, and accepted. Over the following months, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. Grace was everything David had dreamed of in a wife. She was kind, humble, respectful to his mother, active in church, and passionate about helping people through her nursing work. She never asked him for money or expensive gifts. She seemed content with simple things: walks by the river, conversations under the mango tree, shared meals of rice and stew. After a year of courtship, David proposed. Grace said yes with tears of joy in her eyes. The wedding was simple but beautiful, attended by the whole village. David's mother wept with happiness, thanking God that her son had found such a virtuous woman. Everyone agreed that David and Grace were the perfect couple, blessed by God himself. For the first 2 years of their marriage, life was exactly as David had imagined. Grace was the perfect wife. She woke up before him every morning to prepare breakfast. She kept their home spotless. She never complained about their modest lifestyle. She was loving, attentive, and supportive. When David came home tired from teaching, she would massage his shoulders and ask about his day. She still worked at the clinic, but always made time for him and his mother. The village women envied David, constantly asking their husbands why they couldn't be more like Sister Grace. The church praised her as a model Christian wife. David would beam with pride whenever anyone complimented Grace. He felt like the luckiest man alive. But Grace had one habit that David found a bit unusual. Every night, around 11 o'clock, she would excuse herself for what she called her prayer time. She would go to their bedroom, lock the door, and spend about an hour in there. David never questioned it. He thought it was admirable that his wife was so dedicated to her faith. She also had a habit of traveling to visit her sick aunt in the city every Friday evening, returning Sunday afternoon. David thought this showed her caring nature. His friends' wives never made such sacrifices for family. Grace would pack a small bag, kiss him goodbye, and catch the evening bus to the capital. She always came back looking tired but happy, with stories about helping her aunt with housework and medical care. David's best friend Michael was the first to notice something odd. Michael owned a small electronics shop and traveled to the capital city regularly for business. One Saturday night, while having drinks with business partners at an upscale club in the city, Michael froze. There, at the VIP section, surrounded by wealthy men in expensive suits, was a woman who looked exactly like Grace. But this woman was nothing like the modest Grace he knew. This woman wore a tight, revealing red dress that left little to the imagination. Her makeup was heavy and glamorous. Her hair was styled in long, expensive-looking weaves. She was laughing loudly, drinking champagne, and dancing in ways that made Michael's jaw drop. She had her arms around a fat man wearing gold chains and a Rolex watch. The man's hands were all over her, and she didn't seem to mind at all. Michael rubbed his eyes, thinking the alcohol was playing tricks on him. But no, even from across the club, he could see it was Grace, or someone who looked exactly like her. He wanted to approach, but felt frozen. What would he even say? Was it really her? It couldn't be. Grace was supposed to be taking care of her sick aunt. Grace didn't wear clothes like that. Grace didn't drink or party. This had to be someone else. But then the woman turned, and Michael saw her face clearly in the club lights. It was definitely Grace. No doubt about it. Same face, same beauty mark on her left cheek, same distinctive laugh he'd heard at David's house 100 times. Michael's stomach turned. He quickly left the club, his mind racing. Should he tell David? What if he was wrong? What if Grace had a twin sister David didn't know about? But he couldn't shake what he'd seen. The next week, Michael casually mentioned to David that he'd seen someone who looked just like Grace at a club in the city. David laughed it off immediately. My Grace? In a club? Brother, you were drunk. Grace was taking care of her aunt all weekend. She came back exhausted from all the housework and nursing. There's no way. Maybe you saw someone who looks like her. You know they say everyone has a twin somewhere in the world. Michael wanted to push the issue but saw the absolute certainty in David's eyes. David trusted Grace completely. Challenging that trust would only damage their friendship. So Michael let it go, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. He started noticing other things too. Grace always had her nails done perfectly, expensive-looking acrylics that changed every week. Her phone was the latest iPhone model, far beyond what a village nurse could afford. She had designer handbags that Michael recognized from the luxury stores in the capital. When he subtly asked Grace about her phone, she smiled and said it was a gift from a grateful patient's family. David never questioned any of it. He was too in love, too trusting, too convinced that he knew his wife completely. But Michael wasn't the only one noticing things. David's mother, Mama Rose, had also begun to have concerns. Grace's sick aunt had supposedly been sick for 2 years now, every single weekend, yet never seemed to get better or worse. Mama Rose had suggested visiting the aunt several times, but Grace always had excuses. The aunt was sleeping, or had other visitors, or wasn't feeling up to guests. One Friday evening, David's whole world began to unravel. He had planned to surprise Grace with a weekend trip to a nearby resort he'd been saving for months. He left school early, excited to tell her to cancel her aunt visit this weekend. But when he arrived home at 4 in the afternoon, Grace wasn't there. This was strange. She usually finished her clinic shift at 3 and was always home by 3:30. David waited. 5 o'clock came. 6 o'clock. He called her phone. It rang, but she didn't answer. He went to the clinic, but they said she'd left at her usual time. Now David was worried. Had something happened to her? An accident? At 7 o'clock, Grace finally walked through the door. But she wasn't wearing her nurse uniform. She was wearing tight jeans, high heels, and a low-cut top, with a face full of makeup. David had never seen her dressed like this. She looked startled to see him home early. David, what are you doing home? She asked, her voice higher than usual. I could ask you the same thing, David replied slowly, confused by her outfit. Where were you? And why are you dressed like that? Grace laughed nervously. Oh, I had to go to the city unexpectedly. A friend needed help with something urgent. I changed because my uniform got dirty. I was just about to shower and get ready to visit Auntie. Something in her explanation felt off, but David couldn't put his finger on what. He told her about the resort surprise, and Grace's face fell. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry, but I already promised Annie I'd come this weekend. She's been asking for me. Can we go next weekend instead? David felt disappointment, but agreed. Grace kissed him, grabbed her overnight bag, and left for the bus station. As she walked away, David noticed something that made his heart skip. The bag she was carrying was a Louis Vuitton, easily worth more than 3 months of her salary. That night, David couldn't sleep. Michael's words echoed in his mind. The expensive items. The mysterious Friday departures. The aunt who was sick for 2 years straight. Grace's startled reaction to seeing him home early. Her outfit that was nothing like his modest wife would wear. His mind was at war with his heart. He loved Grace. He trusted Grace. But doubt had planted its seed. At 2 in the morning, David made a decision that would change everything. He would go to the city tomorrow and see for himself. If Grace was really taking care of her sick aunt, he'd feel foolish but relieved. He'd apologize to God for doubting his wife. But if she wasn't, David didn't want to finish that thought. Saturday evening, David borrowed Michael's car and drove to the capital city. He'd asked Grace for her aunt's address months ago, though he'd never used it. When he arrived at the address, his confusion deepened. It was a luxury apartment building in the most expensive part of the city. He asked the security guard about Grace's aunt. The guard looked confused. No elderly woman lives here, sir. This building is mostly young professionals and business people. Very expensive rent. David's heart began to pound. He showed the guard a photo of Grace on his phone. Have you seen this woman? The guard's face lit up. Oh yes, Miss Grace. She comes every weekend. But she doesn't visit anyone here. She lives in apartment 412. Very nice lady. Always well-dressed. Has lots of gentlemen visitors. This is absolutely insane. If you're as shocked as I am right now, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think is going on. Would you confront your spouse or investigate more? Share this video with someone who loves dramatic stories. Now let's see what David does next. David felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. The security guard's words echoed in his head. Lives in apartment 412. Gentlemen visitors. Well-dressed. This couldn't be his Grace. His simple, modest, church-going Grace. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the guard was confused. Maybe Grace was helping a friend who lived there. He had to see for himself. David waited in the parking lot, his heart racing. At 9 o'clock, he saw movement. A taxi pulled up, and out stepped someone who looked like Grace, but also didn't. This Grace wore a tight black dress that hugged every curve, glittering jewelry, and heels so high David wondered how she could walk. Her makeup was dramatic, smoky eyes, red lips, highlighted cheeks. Her weave flowed down her back in perfect waves. She looked like a completely different person. She looked like what young people called a slay queen. She wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit had his arm around her waist. They were laughing, clearly comfortable with each other. The man's hand slid lower, and Grace didn't push it away. She leaned into him as they walked toward the building entrance. David felt sick. He wanted to confront them right there, but his body wouldn't move. He sat frozen, watching his wife disappear into the building with another man. For 3 hours, David sat in that parking lot, his mind spinning. At midnight, the man left, adjusting his tie and looking satisfied. At 1 in the morning, another man arrived. Younger, flashier, driving a Mercedes. He went up to the same apartment. David checked the apartment number with the security guard, who confirmed it was Grace's place. This second man left at 3 in the morning. David had seen enough. He drove back to Green Hill in a daze, arriving home at dawn. He didn't sleep. He couldn't eat. On Sunday afternoon, Grace came home as usual, looking tired but peaceful in her modest church clothes. She kissed David's cheek and asked about his weekend. David wanted to scream, to accuse, to demand answers. But instead, he heard himself say, "It was fine. How's your aunt?" "Much better, thank God." Grace replied with a sweet smile. She was so grateful I came. The lie rolled off her tongue so easily, so naturally. David realized this was not the first time. She had been lying to him for their entire marriage, every single weekend for 2 years. Who was this woman? Over the next week, David became a detective of his own marriage. He checked Grace's phone while she slept. It was locked with a password she'd never had before. He followed her after work one day and watched her change from her nurse uniform into glamorous clothes in a public restroom before catching a taxi to parts of town she'd never mentioned. He checked their modest savings account and found that Grace had been depositing and withdrawing large sums of money through a separate account he didn't know existed. He called the clinic and learned that Grace frequently called in sick on Fridays, claiming various illnesses. Everything was a lie. Finally, David couldn't take it anymore. He confronted Michael and told him everything. Michael, heartbroken for his friend, confessed that he'd seen Grace at that club not once, but 3 times over the past months. Each time with different men. Each time dressed like a completely different person. "I wanted to tell you, brother," Michael said, his voice heavy. "But I knew it would destroy you." David decided he needed to confront Grace, but he wanted evidence she couldn't deny. The following Friday, he told Grace he'd be traveling to a teacher's conference in a distant town and would be gone all weekend. Grace's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's wonderful for your career, honey. Don't worry about me. I'll stay home this weekend. Auntie is feeling better anyway." Another lie. So casual. So practiced. That Friday evening, David pretended to leave with his bag. But instead, he parked Michael's car down the street and waited. At 6 o'clock, Grace emerged from their house completely transformed. Gone was the simple nurse. In her place was a woman David barely recognized. Tight dress, heavy makeup, expensive jewelry, designer bag. She caught a taxi to the bus station. David followed at a distance. He followed her all the way to the city, to that luxury apartment building. He waited outside. At 9 o'clock, a car pulled up, a Range Rover that cost more than David would make in 10 years. A man in his 50s, pot-bellied and dripping with gold jewelry, stepped out. Grace came down and greeted him with a kiss that made David's blood boil. They drove off together. David followed them to an exclusive restaurant where the cheapest meal cost more than David's monthly salary. He watched through the window as Grace laughed and flirted, as the man fed her expensive food, as she touched his arm and smiled in ways she used to smile at David. After dinner, they went to a luxury hotel. David's heart shattered into a million pieces as he watched his wife enter that hotel with another man. He sat in the car and wept like a child. Everything he believed, everything he trusted, everything he'd built his life on was a lie. But David didn't confront her that night. Something in him needed to understand why. The next morning, he did something he'd never done before. He hired a private investigator. Within 3 days, the investigator had delivered a file that made everything even more complicated and shocking than David could have imagined. Grace wasn't just cheating. She was living an entire double life. According to the report, Grace had been a slay queen long before she met David. In the city, she was known as Gracie Baby, a high-end companion who dated wealthy businessmen, politicians, and rich married men. She had multiple apartments, expensive cars given to her by various men, and a lifestyle funded entirely by these relationships. She would see different men on different nights, accepting cash, gifts, and luxury experiences in exchange for companionship and intimacy. But here's what broke David's heart even more. Grace had apparently gotten tired of that life. She'd wanted to settle down, to have a normal family, to escape the exhausting cycle of pleasing wealthy men who saw her as a possession. So she'd come to Greenhill, played the role of a simple village nurse, and trapped the most honest, hard-working man she could find, David. She'd thought she could have both lives, the security and respectability of marriage in the village, and the money and luxury of her city life on weekends. The investigator's report showed bank statements, photographs, text messages with her various sponsors, even recordings of phone conversations where Grace referred to David as her safety net and her retirement plan. One message to her friend read, "David is so stupid and trusting. He believes everything I say. It's almost too easy. I can have my fun and still have a good husband waiting at home. Best of both worlds." David felt something break inside him that couldn't be repaired. But before he could decide what to do, the investigator gave him one more piece of information that changed everything. "There's something else, Mr. David. Something you need to know. Grace's lifestyle isn't just about greed or pleasure. She's been paying off a massive debt. A very dangerous debt." According to the investigator's findings, 5 years ago, before Grace met David, her father had borrowed money from a notorious loan shark in the city to pay for her younger brother's emergency surgery. The amount was substantial, $50,000. Her father had promised to pay it back within a year, using his small business as collateral. But 6 months later, her father died suddenly of a heart attack. The debt remained. The loan sharks didn't care that he was dead. They wanted their money, and the debt passed to the family. Grace's mother was a poor market woman who could barely feed herself. Her younger brother was still in school. The responsibility fell entirely on Grace. The loan sharks had given her an ultimatum: pay the debt with heavy interest, or they would take her brother and sell him into forced labor, possibly worse. Desperate and with no way to earn that kind of money as a simple nurse, Grace had entered the world of high-end escort services. Every dollar she made from those wealthy men went directly to paying down that debt. For 5 years, she'd been selling herself piece by piece to save her brother's life. She still owed $15,000. The luxury items, the expensive lifestyle David had seen. It was all for show, to attract wealthier clients who paid more. Grace herself lived in fear, trapped in a nightmare of her father's making. The investigator had even obtained Grace's personal diary, which she kept hidden in her city apartment. In it, she'd written about meeting David, falling in love with him despite not meaning to, wanting desperately to tell him the truth, but being terrified he'd leave her. She'd written about hating herself, about crying in hotel bathrooms after being with men she found disgusting, about praying for forgiveness and strength. One entry broke David completely. It read, "David is the only good thing in my life. The only pure thing. I'm so dirty, so broken. He deserves better than me. But I'm too selfish to let him go. He's the only reason I haven't given up completely. When I'm in Greenhill with him, I can pretend I'm still human. I can pretend I'm still worth something." David sat in his car reading that diary, tears streaming down his face. His wife wasn't a villain. She was a victim. She'd been trying to save her family the only way she knew how, and it had cost her everything: her dignity, her peace, her soul. She'd married him not to deceive him, but because she desperately wanted a different life, a clean life. But the debt had trapped her, forcing her to continue the double life she hated. That Sunday evening, when Grace returned home from her aunt's house, David was waiting. He'd sent his mother away for the night. When Grace walked in with her usual tired smile and modest clothes, ready to slip back into her role, David simply said 4 words that made her freeze. "I know everything, Grace." The color drained from her face. Her bag dropped from her hands. "David, I can explain," but David held up his hand. "The diary. I read your diary. I know about the debt. I know about your father. I know about your brother. I know why you did it. Grace's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing in a way that sounded like something dying. I'm sorry, she wailed. I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you. I tried so many times. But I was so afraid. So ashamed. I love you, David. I really love you. You're the only real thing in my horrible life. I know I don't deserve you. I know I'm disgusting. But please, please understand. I did it to save my brother. They would have killed him. I had no choice. David knelt beside her, and what he did next shocked even himself. He pulled her into his arms. How much do you still owe? He asked quietly. 15,000, Grace whispered. I've been paying for 5 years, but the interest keeps growing. I'm so close to the end, but it feels like I'll never escape. David was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that made Grace look up in disbelief. We'll pay it together. I have some savings. Not much, but it's a start. We'll sell my car. We'll sell anything we need to. I'll get a second job. We'll figure this out together. But the double life ends today. Right now. You're done. Grace couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why would you help me? After everything I've done? All the lies. All the betrayal. David's eyes filled with tears. Because you're my wife. Because I took vows before God. For better or worse. Because you didn't betray me for greed or pleasure. You were trying to save your family. Because that diary showed me a woman who's been carrying hell on her shoulders alone. Because everyone deserves a chance at redemption. And because I love you, Grace. The real you. Not the village nurse act, not the city slay queen, but the broken woman underneath who just wants to be free. For the first time in 5 years, Grace felt hope. Over the next 6 months, David and Grace worked together like warriors in battle. David took a second job teaching night classes at a private school in the nearby town. Grace picked up extra nursing shifts. They sold David's car and used public transportation. They lived on next to nothing, eating simple meals, cutting every possible expense. David's mother, once she learned the truth, sold her precious gold jewelry, her only valuable possessions, to help. Even Michael contributed what he could. But the most important change was that Grace quit her city life completely. She blocked all her wealthy sponsors. She gave up the luxury apartment. She deleted her Gracie baby persona forever. It wasn't easy. The loan sharks threatened her when the payments suddenly came from different sources. But David stood firm, even going to the police and getting them involved to prevent harassment. The investigation into the illegal lending operation led to arrests. Grace's debt was recalculated fairly without the criminal interest rates, reducing what she owed significantly. Finally, after 8 months of sacrifice and struggle, they made the final payment. Grace's brother was truly free. Grace was truly free. And for the first time since her father died, Grace could breathe. She stood in their small house in Greenhill, looking at David with tears of gratitude and love. You saved me, she said, when I didn't deserve saving. When any other man would have thrown me away. You chose to love me instead. David took her hand. That's what real love does. It sees the darkness and chooses light anyway. It sees the broken pieces and chooses to help rebuild. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. But we're perfect for each other. The village eventually learned the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Some people judged Grace harshly. Some gossiped and whispered. But others saw a woman who had fought impossible circumstances and a man who had shown Christ-like forgiveness. Slowly, Grace rebuilt her reputation through genuine good works and authentic living. She became a powerful advocate for young women trapped in debt and exploitation, using her story to warn and help others. David and Grace's marriage became stronger than ever, built now on truth and sacrifice rather than deception and illusion. They had learned the hardest way that secrets destroy, but truth and forgiveness heal. That real love isn't blind. It sees everything and chooses to love anyway. That redemption is always possible when someone is willing to extend grace. And that sometimes the person you think you know least is actually fighting the hardest battle you never saw. Years later, they would tell their children this story, not to shame their mother, but to teach them about compassion, about the complexity of human choices, about the power of forgiveness, and about never judging someone's journey until you've walked in their shoes. Grace was a slay queen. David never knew. But when he found out, he chose love over judgment, redemption over revenge, and building together over tearing apart. And that made all the difference. So what's the lesson here? Don't judge people too quickly because you don't know what battles they're fighting in secret. Sometimes people make terrible choices for understandable reasons. Real love means choosing to forgive and rebuild even when you have every right to walk away. And most importantly, debt and desperation can trap good people in dark places, which is why we must always be compassionate and ready to help those who are suffering. What did you think of this story? Was David right to forgive Grace? Would you have done the same? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you. If this story moved you, touched you, or taught you something, smash that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message about forgiveness and redemption. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we have more powerful African folktales coming that will challenge how you think about love, loyalty, and life. Check out our playlist for more incredible stories. Remember, everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Choose compassion. Choose forgiveness. Choose love. Until next time, stay blessed and keep your heart open to understanding others. I'll see you in the next story.